Everyone in the garage laughed when 20-year-old Jamal Hayes walked in, wearing worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, holding a set of well-used sockets. The owner, Frank Dalton, dared him to fix an engine his top mechanics had declared hopeless. Cameras rolled, expecting a disaster. But what Jamal did next turned the room silent, and what he revealed about who trained him left grown men speechless. No one saw it coming. What was hidden behind his calm eyes would change everything. And it all started here. Jamal stepped into Dalton's auto repair just before noon, his boots coated in dust from the long walk down the highway. He was only 20, but there was something purposeful about the way he moved, as if the faint smell of grease on his hands carried more knowledge than half the crew combined. The garage buzzed with activity until, one by one, heads turned. A few mechanics chuckled. One whispered, "Who's the kid?" Another said, "Wrong place, young man." Frank Dalton, the garage owner, emerged from his office holding a clipboard. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with oil-stained jeans and a firm voice that carried weight. He raised an eyebrow at the sight of the young man. "Can I help you?" he asked with a smirk, expecting him to ask for directions or sell something. "I heard you had an engine no one could fix," Jamal replied calmly. His voice was clear, strong, and unwavering. That stopped Frank. He glanced at his head mechanic, Carlos, who rolled his eyes and leaned against the hood of a rusted-out pickup truck. "Kid, this is not a classroom," Carlos said. "This engine is toast. ECU is fried. Timing is off. Compression is dead. Even NASA could not restart this thing." Jamal stepped closer. "Let me take a look." Frank crossed his arms, intrigued by the boldness. "You know what? Fine. Let us have some fun. You fix this engine and I will pay you $500. You mess it up, you clean the bay for a week. Deal." Every mechanic in the garage turned to watch. Phones came out. Some started recording. Jamal nodded once. "Deal." He dropped his backpack, ran a hand through his short hair, and climbed into the engine bay without hesitation. The room went quiet, except for the clicking of sockets and the hum of Jamal's focus. He worked with precision, not wasting a single motion. Within minutes, he bypassed a faulty sensor, realigned the crankshaft manually, and rewired a section of corroded harness using nothing but a multi-tool and a soldering pen from his bag. Frank watched, his amusement slowly fading into disbelief. Carlos leaned in closer, blinking in confusion. How did he know to reset the fuel map manually? He whispered. Jamal kept going, never looking up. Every move was confident, every decision sharp. 30 minutes later, he stepped back, wiped his hands on a rag, and said, "Try it now." Frank turned the key. The engine coughed, then roared. Silence followed. Absolute stunned silence. Carlos mouthed, "What just happened?" Jamal turned to Frank, meeting his stunned eyes. "You asked who taught me. It was my father. He rebuilt engines before I could walk." Frank opened his mouth, but said nothing. A single thought echoed through the room. Who was this young man really? What none of them knew was that Jamal's past held a secret far more powerful than the engine he just revived. And in the next few minutes, the truth would flip everything they thought they knew upside down. Frank stood frozen beside the rumbling engine, his hands still resting on the ignition key. Around him, silence settled over the garage like a heavy fog. Every mechanic who had laughed at Jamal just minutes earlier now stared in disbelief, their jaws slack, their pride deflating with every smooth purr of the engine. The impossible had just become reality, and a young man had done it in under 30 minutes. Carlos scratched his head, eyes darting between Jamal and the engine like he had just seen a ghost. "Who is your father?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jamal glanced at the floor for a moment, then straightened his shoulders. "My dad was Isaiah Ike Johnson," he said quietly. The name dropped like a hammer in the room. A stunned hush followed. Tony stepped back slowly. Frank's eyes widened. "Isaiah Johnson," he repeated like he could not believe it. Jamal nodded once. "He taught me everything before he passed away." Frank leaned against the workbench, his mind reeling. Isaiah Johnson was not just a mechanic. He was a legend, known across the state for building custom engines that outran Ferraris and outlasted military tanks. He had worked on engines for NASCAR teams, high-end restorations, and even military contracts. His skills had become myth after he suddenly disappeared from the scene years ago. No one had heard much since. And now his son had just walked into Frank's garage and resurrected a junkyard relic like it was second nature. "Why did you not tell me who you were?" Frank asked, still processing the moment. "Because I wanted to see how people treated someone with no name," Jamal replied, his voice firm but not bitter. "I wanted to earn it." That line cut through the room like a blade. Some of the younger mechanics shifted uncomfortably. A few lowered their phones. No one was laughing anymore. Jamal picked up his backpack, but before he could leave, Frank stopped him. "Wait," he said. "I owe you $500. He pulled a wad of cash from his back pocket and counted it out slowly, as if paying him made everything more real. Jamal took it politely, but his expression did not change. "I am not here for money," he said. "I came because this garage used to mean something. My dad worked here before he opened his own shop. He told me stories about how this place used to be about passion, not pride." Frank's face darkened. "That was a long time ago." Jamal stared at him, his eyes sharp. "Then maybe it is time to bring that back." Those words hit deeper than anyone expected. Carlos folded his arms, glancing at the younger crew. They looked shaken, some even embarrassed. The mood in the room had shifted entirely, like someone had pulled the curtain back and revealed something raw underneath. Before Jamal could step out the door, a loud voice interrupted. "Wait! Before you go, can you help me?" It was Logan, one of the youngest apprentices, barely 18, wide-eyed and clearly inspired. Jamal turned. "With what?" "My Civic," he said nervously. "It has been misfiring for weeks. No one can figure it out." Frank opened his mouth to say something, but stopped himself. Jamal walked back in without a word, heading toward the corner of the garage where the Civic sat. This time, no one laughed. Something had begun, and none of them knew just how deep Jamal's connection to the past and the truth about his father would go. The Civic sat quietly under the flickering garage lights. Its hood already opened like it was waiting for someone to finally understand it. Logan stood beside it, nervous, wiping his hands on his jeans as Jamal approached. Everyone else stayed back, watching silently, not wanting to interrupt what felt like something sacred. Even Frank, who had run this shop for over 20 years, did not dare speak. Jamal did not hesitate. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small leather pouch, old, worn, and clearly valuable. He unzipped it carefully to reveal a collection of vintage precision tools, some engraved with the initials IJ. Each one had the shine of decades of care, but more importantly, they held stories. Stories of late nights in oil-stained overalls, engines roaring back to life under the hands of a legend. Logan leaned closer. "Are those your dad's?" Jamal nodded. "He gave them to me the day I rebuilt my first transmission. I was 12. The group stirred. Even Carlos raised his eyebrows. He ran his fingers along the edge of the engine like he was reading it. Then he closed his eyes for a second, listening not just to the metal, but to the echoes of lessons, the sound of his father's voice in his memory. "Start it up," he said. Logan climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered, hesitated, then stumbled into a rough idle, shaking like it had no rhythm left in it. Jamal listened closely. Then he motioned for him to cut it. "Misfire is not just mechanical," he said, stepping in. "It is emotional. Engines speak if you listen." Frank scoffed slightly, but the others leaned in closer. Jamal checked the plugs, tightened the coils, then reached behind the intake manifold. His hand found a broken vacuum hose. He did not celebrate. He just nodded to himself, replaced it with a spare from his pouch, and adjusted the throttle body. "Try it again," he said. Logan did. The Civic roared to life. Smooth, clean, almost too perfect. The look on Logan's face was one of pure awe. "How did you know?" Jamal looked at him seriously. "Because that sound, that specific uneven rumble followed by a dip. It is what my dad called the heartbeat misfire. He said, "You feel it in your bones before you even see it." The garage fell into silence again, but this time it was filled with respect. Carlos stepped forward, scratching his head. That was unbelievable. Frank, still near the back, seemed torn, like something inside him wanted to admit what he had just witnessed was beyond him. But pride was not an easy thing to let go of. Jamal packed his tools quietly, but his eyes scanned the room. "This place is filled with good people," he said. "But your pride is getting in your way. You are afraid of being wrong." That hit hard. Carlos nodded slowly. Logan stepped forward again. "Can you teach us?" The words hung in the air like a spark waiting to ignite. Jamal did not smile, but something in his eyes softened. "I can share what I know, but it is not just about fixing things," he said. "It is about listening, respecting the machine, respecting each other." That is what my dad believed. A long silence followed. Then, to everyone's surprise, Frank finally spoke. "You said your dad used to work here," he said, voice low. "He was a good man. Taught me everything I knew. Then he left, opened his shop, never looked back." Jamal turned to him. "He left because he wanted more. He believed this place could be great, but he felt ignored. He was tired of being talked over." Frank stared at the floor. The others looked at him, unsure what he would say next. Then he said something no one expected. "Maybe it's time we start listening again." In that moment, the garage shifted, not just in atmosphere, but in purpose. The next morning, the garage looked different, not physically, but in energy. Something had changed overnight. The mechanics arrived earlier than usual. Even Carlos, who always dragged his feet in late with a breakfast burrito and excuses, walked in with gloves already on. The old Civic stood at the center like a monument. Not just a car, but a symbol of something they had nearly lost. Pride in their craft. Jamal was already there, wearing the same jeans and t-shirt, his short hair neatly in place. He was wiping down a set of wrenches, laying them out with precision that made even the veterans feel like they had something to learn. No one laughed at him anymore. They watched him. They listened. Frank came in last. His face was unreadable, but his posture had softened. For the first time in years, he was not barking orders or criticizing. He walked over to Jamal, paused, then handed him a mug of coffee. "Black, no sugar, right?" He looked at him. "That is right." It was a small gesture, but in that world, it meant everything. By noon, the shop had turned into something between a classroom and a pit crew. Jamal stood over the hood of a Mustang with Logan, showing him how to calibrate the idle air control valve. He did not just tell him what to do. He explained the why. Every part, every sound, every movement had meaning. "Feel that?" he asked as the engine smoothed out. "That is the car saying thank you." Logan smiled wide. "You talk like cars are alive." Jamal did not hesitate. "They are, just not in the way most people understand." In the corner, Carlos watched silently. Then he picked up a torque wrench, walked over and asked, "What are you doing after this?" Jamal raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because there is an old Camaro in Bay 3 that has been mocking me for a week. I think it respects you more than it respects me." That got a rare laugh out of him. He followed him, and together they opened the hood. Meanwhile, Frank stepped into his office and closed the door behind him. The blinds were open so he could still see everything. He watched as his team, his once disjointed, prideful, disconnected team, worked together. It was not just about fixing cars anymore. It was about rebuilding trust. And it had started with a young man no one wanted to listen to. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo. 3 men in overalls, grease-stained and smiling. One of them was Jamal's father, Isaiah Johnson, the man who taught him everything. The man he had once called brother. The man he had let down. Frank stared at the photo, then picked up the phone and made a call. "Hello?" A voice answered. "It's Frank. I need to talk to you about your son." Outside, Jamal finished with the Camaro. He wiped his hands, looked around, and saw what was forming. Family, one bolt at a time. Just then, a sleek black Escalade pulled into the lot. It was clean, expensive, and out of place. The kind of vehicle that turned heads because it did not belong in a place like this. The door opened. A tall man in a sharp gray suit stepped out, sunglasses hiding his eyes. His shoes were polished, his walk steady, confident. He moved like someone who owned buildings, not just cars. But when he looked at Jamal, his expression changed. Jamal Hayes. He tensed. Yes. The man removed his glasses. I am Dean Mercer, Chief Executive Officer of Mercer Motors. Your father saved my life 15 years ago. I heard what you did yesterday. The entire garage fell silent. Dean stepped forward. I want to talk business. And I want to talk now. And just like that, the story shifted again. Not from the garage floor, but to something bigger. Something that would test everything he had ever learned. The office door closed behind Jamal with a soft click, but inside the air was heavy. Dean Mercer sat across the desk, calm but deliberate, his movements sharp like the edge of a freshly cut gear. The rest of the garage stood frozen, their faces pressed to the windows, watching through the glass like it was a movie scene they could not miss. Dean looked at him with the kind of intensity that made even experienced executives hesitate. But Jamal held his ground, his back straight, his eyes steady. He had grown up in grease and steel, not polished boardrooms, but his resolve was carved in something far stronger than confidence. It was carved in fire. Dean leaned forward. I have followed your journey from the moment I got the call. You resurrected a dead car, united a broken team, and rebuilt trust in a shop where it was nearly extinct. That is not just impressive. That is rare. Jamal stayed quiet. Dean smiled. I am not here for compliments. I am here for opportunity. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents stamped with the Mercer Motor seal. I am opening a new division, he said. An elite performance and innovation unit. Custom builds, concept development, young minds with real hands-on talent. No politics, no fluff. I want you to lead it. Jamal blinked. Lead it? Yes. You would be the youngest project director in Mercer Motors history. You would choose your team, your shop, your vision. The offer hung in the air like a spark about to ignite. He opened the folder and scanned the terms. Then he paused. What about this garage? What about Frank and the others? Dean nodded. I assumed you would ask that. You can take them with you, or... He stood and walked to the window looking out at the shop floor. Or you can turn this place into the first official Mercer innovation satellite. You make the calls. I just provide the tools. Outside, Frank looked in through the window, his face unreadable again. For years, he had run this place with clenched fists and closed doors. But now he gave him a small nod. The kind that said, "This is yours now." Jamal took a deep breath. I will do it, but on my terms. No suits walking in and treating these guys like background noise. The shop lives and breathes because of them. You mess with that and I walk. Dean turned, a rare grin touching his lips. Deal. Word spread like wildfire. The next day, new tools arrived, branded gear, state-of-the-art systems. But what mattered more was the change in energy. Jamal now stood at the head of something that was no longer broken, but reborn. Customers poured in, not because of flashy ads, but because word traveled. There was something different happening at that garage. Mechanics who respected each other. A young man who knew engines better than anyone, and a team that operated like a heartbeat. Strong, steady, and impossible to stop. 3 weeks later, a man walked in, wearing an old leather jacket and a crooked smile. He looked around, eyes landing on Jamal. You look like your father, he said. He once fixed my car in the middle of a snowstorm without asking for $1. Jamal smiled. That sounds like him. The man nodded. He was a good man, and now you are carrying that torch. Later that night, after the shop closed, Jamal stood outside, staring at the stars, his mind full but his heart still. Frank walked up beside him. Your dad would be proud, he said. Jamal whispered. I hope so. Frank handed him a box. Inside was his father's old name patch. Johnson, still stained with oil. Put it up, he said. Right above the new sign. The next morning, the garage had a new name. Johnson Performance Garage, in honor of the past, built for the future. It was more than a business. It was a legacy. And it all started because one young man refused to be ignored.